Please welcome back to the stage the Honorable Wilbur Ross, Secretary of the United States Department of Commerce, to moderate a discussion on commercial space and innovation.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to see all the interest that has been growing in the commercial space sector. As some of you may know, President Trump reestablished the National Space Council last year. And during each of our 3 meetings since then, the Council has increased the Department of Commerce's mission in promoting the commercial space industry. In fact, I just got back from Capitol Hill, where I testified before the House Science Committee and the House Armed Services Committee in a joint session about our plans to take a bigger role in space traffic management. The space industry is growing fast, and it needs to be unleashed from the constraints that have been placed upon it. We're moving quickly in that direction. Space Policy Directive 2, signed by President Trump last month, directed the Department of Commerce and other agencies to execute regulatory reforms that will advance business opportunities in space. To make sure that happens, the Commerce Department has created a new division under my office called the Space Policy Advancing Commercial Enterprise, or SPACE Administration. There's a lot of activity going on beyond just the creation of the Space Administration. We're changing regulations related to remote sensing, to reducing licensing delays, to reforming export controls, freeing up spectrum to help promote 5G, and creating a space traffic management system to deal with the more than 600,000 pieces of space debris. Joining me on stage to talk about the prospects for commercial space are George Whitesides, CEO of Virgin Galactic, and Dan Hart, President of Virgin Atlantic. George was previously Chief of Staff for NASA, and Virgin Galactic is Sir Richard Branson's human spaceflight venture. Galactic, amazingly, already has collected $250,000 each from 600 people for the first space tourism trip. That's $150 million of cash, a pretty good start. Virgin Orbit is set up to launch constellations of small satellites. Dan Hart, its president, was previously vice president of government satellite systems at Boeing. He's a 30-year...
that a company called Scaled Composites did in Mojave, California, called the Spaceship One program, and that won the X Prize competition in 2004. And so when Richard was looking to commercialize that technology, it was clear that we needed to be near that center of excellence. And there's some really exciting stuff happening in California, and Mojave in particular, where there's really a node of space innovation going on there between many different companies. And what that meant was that we could tap into the labor pool of people who both knew about how to move quick and how to build space stuff very efficiently. And so for us, it was clear that we needed to be there.
Great.
And I would say for Virgin Orbit is a satellite launch platform. It's a new kind of satellite launch platform because we are air-launched off of a 747 airplane. And so it has both the legacy of space and innovation.
Right.
And so we located in a place where we have a very rich talent pool, a very long legacy of space. And also we're drawing from other industries, from Silicon Valley, from manufacturing sectors that are advancing manufacturing, and kind of combining that legacy and newness and innovation in the U.S. is just perfectly positioned for that.
Well, great. Is there anything that's holding back your growth, either one of you?
There's always market forces, and so we have a competitive international market. In general, though, there's a transformation going on in space.
Right.
And in general, there's a huge door opening for small satellites. And so we see a very rich market with huge potential. And it's really up to us now to provide the service and really accelerate that.
Great. How about you, Dan?
Well, you know, I think in terms of regulation and in terms of business environment, we're doing overall quite well. I think we are competing internationally, and that's one of the challenges from the past has been that some of the ITAR regulations and other things have potentially constrained U.S. space businesses from working abroad, and so I know that's one of the efforts that's going on now to help U.S. businesses compete internationally.
So describe a little bit your experience with the U.S. regulatory processes.
We have found our primary regulator is the FAA, and we have found them to be a good partner. Congress set out a regulatory environment in 2004 for suborbital spaceflight, and it's been, I think, quite a forward-leaning regulatory environment for us. So, you know, in general sense, that model is now being emulated by other countries around the world, which I think is a very positive sign. It's a sign that people realize that the U.S. regulatory environment is one in which you can take risks, but safe, you know, good risks, and move forward quickly, and that's what's necessary in space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there anything we can do to improve them?
Well, I think there's a lot going on currently to do that. So we see, you know, sort of two dynamics, I think. One is the community within the FAA and across the states who have spaceports are working with us hand in glove, which is very helpful through the current processes. At the same time, in recent months, there's been an effort, I think related to your comments, right. Secretary, to get innovative and see what improvements there are. And so we are working with them. We've offered ideas, and I know the FAA is currently in an activity to update licensing.
Good. And how do you see Virgin's own work expanding over the next few years?
You know, we'll start out, right now the commercial world is driving launch. Eventually we think the U.S. government as well as the international community will also take advantage of our launch capabilities. And so the UAE and other countries are looking at, UAE is an investor into our companies, as well as other countries in Europe are working with us on could we bring our system, and we have systems that are air-launched, so they're very, very light footprints and can bring launch capability. And then there's a whole discussion about space resilience, and we think that that will be an important factor in the future as well.
Right. Well, you might describe for the audience a little bit about how unique your launch system is. I'm not sure people really understand it.
Sure. So in a normal launch system, and I think everybody's seen launches, a large rocket typically is sitting at the launch pad, usually either at Cape Canaveral or Kourou or Vandenberg Air Force Base, and a big infrastructure with a huge tower and a lot of radars and electrical equipment and hundreds of people around it ready to launch the rocket. That's the traditional method. What we do is we have a rocket that is carried under the wing of a 747 aircraft. It travels off of a standard 747 runway, of which there are thousands and thousands around the world, and requires very, very little infrastructure. We have trailerized fuel and pressurizing systems, so it's all portable and really requires almost no footprint on the ground. The rocket is dropped off of the wing at about 35,000 feet of altitude and flies up to space.
And what's the advantage of launching it from already being at an advanced altitude?
So there are physical advantages because we don't have to fight through the lower atmosphere. And so we already have altitude and velocity behind us. And then there's the flexibility advantage, because we can, as I said, we can launch from anywhere. We can fly all the way out to sea, and so we're not near population areas, and that eases some of the licensing requirements.
Are there any limits on the size of the rocket you can deal with in this way?
Yes, we are geared towards small satellites, so satellites upwards of 300 to 500 kilograms. In the past, if you go back 20 years, almost all satellites were thousands of kilograms. But with modern technology, just like your phones have gotten smaller and packed with more functions, satellites have gotten much smaller. So a satellite the size of a washing machine or a microwave can now do what used to be done on something the size of a minivan or a small school bus.
Right. Now, I'm intrigued with the success you've had in marketing space tourism. Tell me, how did you recruit all these people? I understand it's from a large number of countries as well as a large number of people. Richard Branson's a marketing genius, but how did he achieve this?
Well, I think, to your point, I mean, we now have over 50 countries represented in our customer base, and as you mentioned, over 600 customers. An interesting statistic is that only about 550 people have ever been to space. Right. Since 1961, and so in the first bit of operations, we're going to equal that number and then rapidly expand that number, and I think that's going to be a tremendously exciting thing. But in terms of why people are choosing to put down deposits and fly to space with us, I think there are probably a couple of reasons. One is that I think people know that Richard Branson follows through on what he says he's going to do and knows that this is a very important project. Another is that it's based on proven technology in the Spaceship One program, so something that's already been up to space and brought people down safely. In fact, you can just go down to Washington, D.C., and you can see the Spaceship One vehicle hanging in the National Air and Space Museum, which is great. And ultimately, I think it's just, this is something that's a basic human dream, is to experience looking at our planet from above, and I think that will have a transformative impact on humanity.
Well, I know very well how much he follows through, because in my prior life, we were partners in Virgin Money together, which worked out very well, and I'm sure your activities, both of you, will work out well too. Let's give everybody a great round of applause. I think this was a fascinating presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see you. Anybody who has a spare $250,000, please contact him.